Hi everyone, my name is Melissa van Dijk, and in today's video I want to share something that really changed how I think about my health: tracking my blood sugar. Now, I started the experiment back in September 2024, mainly because I kept seeing these glucose monitor devices everywhere and I got curious. I thought maybe blood sugar spikes were linked to my acne, because after all that's what many studies were claiming. So I started measuring my blood sugar every 2 hours after meals. Breakfast, lunch, dessert if I had any, and dinner. And I tracked it every single day without skipping once, because I really wanted to know what was going on in my body and whether there was actually something to it, or if it was just another hyped up gadget like so many that promise results but don't deliver. Now, to make sense of the numbers I was seeing, I used the standard blood sugar ranges for non-diabetics, just to give myself a frame of reference. I don't disagree with these ranges, but personally, and based on what I saw during that time, I think the higher numbers are set too high, especially if you care about prevention. Still, they're a helpful starting point to understand what's generally considered low, normal, or high. So below 70 is technically considered low. That's what's called hypoglycemia, and it can make you feel shaky, tired, and/or dizzy. But honestly, I had plenty of readings in the 60s and felt totally fine. That's why I think it's important to pay attention to how you actually feel, not just the number. That said, the general guideline for post-meal readings is that less than 140 is considered normal about 2 hours after eating. That's usually where your blood sugar should land if things are working well. 140 to 199 falls into the pre-diabetic range. An occasional spike here isn't unusual, but if it happens often, it could mean that your body is having a harder time managing sugar. And 200 or more is considered diabetic. Now, that doesn't mean that you have diabetes from one high reading, but if you're seeing that consistently, it's worth looking into. Now, I have to be honest, I had already changed my diet before starting the experiment, because if you've been a long-time follower of my channel, you know I've disappeared in February 2024 when I started daily tracking of what I was doing and eating. But my point is, I can't compare my before numbers from February to September 2024, because I was eating very differently by then compared to what you're seeing now. Still, my breakouts were present during that time, which is why I altered my diet so drastically throughout the year and started tracking everything even more in detail. And unfortunately, I didn't find any direct link between blood sugar and acne, even though I did get my acne under control. Blood sugar didn't seem to be the root cause of my acne, at least not directly. But the deeper I went into tracking, the more I began to notice other patterns. Ones that actually changed how I eat, how I feel, and how I live day to day. Now, I noticed something else, something I wasn't expecting. Certain meals made my blood sugar spike, sometimes up to around 140 to 150, which on paper is still considered normal. But for me, those numbers already felt like something was off, especially when they followed meals I thought were pretty balanced. Then there were a few meals that pushed it even further, over 170, and in some cases it just kept rising. One hit 199, another one even reached 200. And the strange part, when that happened, I would feel cold, my heart would race like I was having a panic attack, or I would feel weak or completely exhausted. Other times I felt like the sugar shot straight into my head, this weird burst of awareness or overstimulation. It's hard to describe, but if you felt it, you know exactly what I mean. So yes, my body really reacts to those spikes. I had these feelings before, but never connected them to the meals I was eating. And as it turns out, it was exactly that. And it didn't stop there. If I had a spike in the morning, or even just consistently higher blood sugar, around 100 to 120, I would notice a big difference, especially after eating wheat-based foods, things like bread rolls, regular bread, or even other wheat-heavy dishes, especially when combined with food. It felt like my body wanted to keep that sugar high going. Now, I'm not saying I never eat carbs in the morning. Some days I wake up and really want dumplings or a bread roll. And honestly, I don't know why. So yes, I will have it. But I've noticed that if I do that for a few days in a row, things start going downhill. I feel less focused, less steady, and way more off-balanced. And that's why I usually choose not to. But I eventually realized that I'm really sensitive to carbs in the morning, and when I start paying attention, the pattern became obvious, and the cycle would repeat. I would feel cold, weak, tired, and then rarely dizzy, foggy, or even shaky. Another side effect I noticed is that when I continuously did that, it led to a bit of weight gain. Not much, but about 5 to 6 pounds. Eventually, I figured out something really simple. I feel way better when I keep my blood sugar between 70 and 90, especially in the morning. And I usually do that by starting the day with eggs in different variations, like scrambled eggs or stuffed eggs with avocado or sheep yogurt, plus a bit of feta cheese or another similar cheese made from goat or sheep milk. And sometimes I even enjoy a self-made butter cookie after that, without ending up on a blood sugar roller coaster. When I do that, I feel steady, calm and clear-headed, not overly energized, just balanced. Now that led me to look more closely at the foods themselves, not just the numbers. And one of the most surprising things I've learned was how much the type of food and even how it's prepared can affect my blood sugar. And here are a few things that really stood out. First of all, rice, especially jasmine and basmati rice. Sadly, most of the time I wasn't entirely sure which varieties I was eating because most of what you can buy in my area is conventional and just labeled jasmine or basmati. But regardless, rice consistently spiked me way over 140, even when the portion size was totally reasonable. Then there were mashed potatoes, especially when made with starchy varieties. These were an absolute no-go for me. They always caused big spikes. But then came a big surprise. Waxy potatoes. No spike, nothing, they just work. They became by far the best carb source I found during this experiment. I rarely experienced spikes from them, just occasionally when I combined them with things like lentils, cabbage, and to this day I'm not entirely sure why that happened. Maybe it's the combination, or maybe the portion size gets too big, I don't know. But it's definitely something I want to test more. And it's not just what you eat, but what you eat it with. If I had cookies or cake with enough fat, like butter or cream, my blood sugar stayed pretty stable. But if I ate something simple, like a bread roll with just a little topping, or oats with milk and a banana, huge spike. So what I've learned is this: food variety, cooking method, food pairing and food preparation can all make a big difference. And when they happen to come in a bad combination, this is where things are starting to go down the drain. But maybe the biggest surprise in all of this was just how much variety exists within each food category, and how much that variety actually matters. For example, with rice. Basmati refers to the type, but within that there are specific varieties like Pusa Basmati or 1121, and those can behave quite differently. Same with potatoes. Waxy is the type, but specific varieties like Ditta, Annabelle or Charlotte work really well for me, while others in the same category might not. That really taught me not to lump foods together just because they share a label. The specific variety of a plant can make all the difference. And it's not just about cutting carbs completely, it's about learning how your body responds and making small changes that help you feel better. So keep that in mind. One thing I found really interesting, and honestly a bit controversial, is the idea that fruit is always better than refined sugar. Usually the argument is that it contains fiber, so it's gentle on your blood sugar. But honestly, that can be a bit misleading. Fruit actually spiked me way more than a piece of homemade cake, one made with refined sugar, flour, butter, milk and an egg. In my case, it really came down to the fruit itself and probably the portion size too. We think of fruit as a healthy choice, so we eat more of it without thinking twice. And often it's the fruit that contains the most sugar. Take something like a banana with oats and a bit of milk, whether that's plant-based or dairy. It sounds like a healthy meal, but from a blood sugar perspective, it puts a pretty heavy load on your system. Or a single mango. It might seem harmless, but it can completely break your blood sugar levels. Why? Because you tend to indulge in it. You quickly eat the whole thing. And let's be honest, the mangoes varieties you find in supermarkets today are bred for maximum sweetness and low fiber. A real mango, the kind that grows wild, is basically just fiber. I used to eat them straight from the trees in Australia, and they're totally different from what you get in stores now. They were so fibrous that it's actually hard to chew, and it's almost like you feel like it's getting stuck in your throat. If you've ever eaten one, you know exactly what I mean. But when we eat cake, we tend to keep the portion moderate because we already assume it's not healthy. That alone makes the blood sugar impact smaller. So from a blood sugar balance perspective, a homemade cake, especially when it's balanced with fat like butter, can actually be much easier on your system. If keeping your blood sugar stable is your main goal, then yes, a self-made cookie or regular piece of cake can be better than a bowl of sugary foods. That's at least true in my experience. Now maybe food is still better from a macronutrient or nutrition standpoint, I'm not really sure, because these days the conventional foods you find in supermarkets feel more like desserts, just without fat and fiber. Like I said with mangoes, what's being sold now has very little in common with what the food used to be. And honestly, there's nothing in food that you can't also get from vegetables. So from that perspective, eating it often is kind of questionable too. It might actually be better to enjoy that self-made cookie once in a while instead of that high sugary food, especially if you enjoy it more anyway. That realization really shifted how I think about healthy eating overall. It's not just about labels like natural or processed, it's about how your body responds. And sometimes the choices that seem less ideal on paper can actually leave you feeling better in real life. So when I started this experiment to fix my acne, what I found was something even more valuable. A better understanding of how my body works, how to support it, and how to actually feel good. Personally, I think blood sugar tracking devices are worth considering, and they're definitely not a waste of money. I absolutely recommend them if you want to learn more about your own body. But when it comes to acne, I have to be honest, I didn't even find the slightest connection between blood sugar spikes and my breakouts. Yes, I did get my acne under control, but not because I lowered or balanced my blood sugar. It was because I changed my entire diet and reduced toxins in food like pesticides, heavy metals, plastics and other additives, while also carefully choosing foods that help support hormone balance. And that, I believe, was the real cause of my breakouts, not sugar. Because I still regularly consume refined sugar, mostly in forms of self-made cookies or cake, which by the way, you can also find on my channel. Now I'm not saying you should go out and eat tons of refined sugar. It still comes with a long list of health consequences when consumed in excess. But based on my experiment, a homemade cookie or a piece of cake without fruit a few times a week is not what causes acne, at least not for me. And I can say that confidently after nearly 8 months of tracking my blood sugar every single day. If you want to dig deeper into what really causes acne and breakouts, check out some of my other videos. I've linked a few of them at the end of this one, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future updates. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.